My name is Rosa Vallejos Yopan, and I'm an associate professor in the Department of Linguistics. And I do research in the Amazon. I do work with indigenous languages. Documentary fieldwork is one of my focus of research. I do have a very specific memory when I kind of start paying attention to language. I was born and raised in a little town in the foothills of the Andes in Peru. And so when I was in high school, a new teacher came to town, a new language and arts teacher. And I remember one day he started to explain us about syntax with these new novel views of syntactic structure, how sentences are organized and how can we explore these structures of sentences. And later on, when I finished high school, I moved to Lima, Peru. For people that finish high school in the rural areas, the only way to go to college is moving to the big cities, in my case, to the capital city. When I finished college, when I finished my bachelor's degree in linguistics, there was a call to work with for an indigenous organization that had a teacher training program in the Amazon. I heard, I applied, and I was hired to work with a specific group. Those are the Kokama Kokamirias. For me, that was the first time that I traveled to the Amazon, and they just captured my heart. And I've been doing this type of work since then. That was 97. It's more than 25 years now. But the first days were extremely challenging for me because I had to depend completely on other people, right? On kids, for example, to take me around to anywhere that I wanted to go because I needed a canoe and I didn't know how to ride canoes. So the first weeks, I was counting the days to leave the place. Then, like the second, third week, it started to make sense, everything. Like you start to understand what is important in life. These are experiences that kind of change you in a deep way. And I start to understand that I could make a contribution. So my job was to do some basic research, basic description of the language, because these are all what we call low resource languages. Languages for which we don't have much research done, corpus data available. They have minimal to no digital presence. So most of the work has to be done from the scratch, at least around 97, when this project was founded. The first task they asked me to do was to go to the villages, find speakers, and try to describe what we call the phonology of the language. What is the sound patterns, right? We have to uncover, from a language that we don't know, we have to uncover which sounds are significant, are important, that we need to keep track to support the development of a writing system, because we were still trying to design a writing system for this language. The first thing that got my attention is that nobody in the community would use this language on a daily basis. This was no longer the language of communication in the community. And the reason is because this language has been undergoing what we call language shift for almost 4 or 5 decades. The language was only spoken by elders that were more than 60 years old at the time already. So for my first task was trying to find somebody that speaks the language, right? And we did identify some elders. Things have changed in the last decades. There's now a very interesting movement, important movement, that is promoted by the communities themselves, being promoted by the communities to learn the language again, basically what we call a reclamation process. With the Kokamas, I try to work with them every summer that I have. I try to travel and collaborate with them in several projects. In the communities I work with, we have to pay attention, for example, to vocabulary to refer to species, right? The animal species, flora, fauna. And one of the projects that I've done with the Kokamas is building a dictionary took like 12 years or so. These are long-term projects. One of the methods to collect words is in the context of they telling stories, talking to each other, right? Engaging in conversation so that these words emerge in natural settings. And so I ended up with lots of words for fish, for example, or for birds, for example. So when I was transcribing and glossing and analyzing the text, I have tons of words for fish. And the only way that I was coding those words was fish, fish, fish. I ended up like 120 words for fish. And so I was lucky enough that in Iquitos, there are some projects, in particular, this is a group of researchers doing all kinds of projects in the Amazon proper. They have published a guide for the Amazon, right? And I've used this guide for flora and fauna. It's very, focused on this specific region with a specific explanation about the behavior of these species with drawings beautifully done by a local artist about each of these species, right? And so I took this as a book and also in my computer, and I showed them, I did workshops with these elders or whoever knew the language. I show them one by one, to collect the specific names for those. So yeah, I had the generic bird, but then with this type of work, I was able to capture those extremely rich knowledge that they have about their environment. In particular of fish, because they are fishermen. This is something that they rely on to survive mainly. So you see that it's important to document not only this list of words, but also the knowledge that they have, for example, about the behavior of these species, how they interact with each other, why it is important to keep track of specific fishes in certain seasons, why you shouldn't catch them in a particular season, why you have to very much have a management plan for this species, right? Language preservation is extremely complex, and some people would even challenge that whole notion, saying, why do we need to create these items for museums? Is that what we are pretending to do by only focusing on recording, documenting, archiving, for example? And so they are correct, basically correct. If we want to aim to contribute to the revitalization of these languages, we have to do more than just recording or studying or documenting, right? What we also know now is that these projects, these reclamation projects, have to be on the hands of the communities themselves. So people like me, even though I've been working with them for decades now, and even though I'm Peruvian, we are still outsiders. It is the indigenous groups that need to have the conditions for them to live the way they want to live, right? It is the survivors of the communities what is important.